There we go. All right. So I'm just going to briefly run through some of the updates on our programming and give some insight into where we're at with our work in Bellevue now that we are, what, a year and 2 months into this great project that we've got going on the east side. So I'm going to start with our energy programming. As many of you may have seen who own and operate buildings on the east side, we are working to secure our access to the Energy Star portfolio manager accounts of each of the buildings within our membership. This is really important for us as we work to track and help move our building members along toward a more sustainable path and comply with the upcoming laws that we are seeing coming down the pipeline. If you are not set up with Portfolio Manager and you need help doing this, if any of your buildings need help, please feel free to send them our way. We are more than happy to sit down and troubleshoot with you. With the buildings that are in those larger cohorts over 50,000 square feet, you're going to need to find a way to track and report your energy consumption very shortly here when the Clean Buildings Act comes online in 2026. So we really encourage you to get a jump on this now. The sooner the better. For our professional stakeholders, I really just want to make sure that everybody is aware of the offer that we have to promote your services to our members, our building members, as they're looking to upgrade their buildings and explore different projects. If you have business information, service information, one-pagers, materials that we can share with our building owners and managers, please feel free to send them my way. Our goal is to promote this network and grow the folks in the city of Bellevue who are working together to try and bring our buildings into a more sustainable future. So please, please, please reach out to me. We would love to support our members in any way that we can.
Case studies too. If you have any really great stories that you want to share about cool projects that you've been doing, we love to have folks lead by example. So the more you can share about projects that are in the works or have been completed that you think are really great. We just as an example, UMC's on the call. We just shared a great project they're doing for district energy up in Bellingham. So, that's the kind of thing that we'd like to see replicated in other places. Send us what you got. We'd love to share it with our membership.
Absolutely. So the next programming area I want to talk about is our transportation work. And this will kind of just be a little bit of a brief overview, but we're working with the Bellevue transportation team to begin tracking our transportation emissions in the city of Bellevue. As you know, part of the 2030 district goals is to reduce transportation emissions by 50% by the year 2030. So we're working to get that tracking up and going. So stay tuned for our work on that. I also want to just briefly mention that the city of Bellevue is launching their commute trip reduction surveys this October. So if you are a CTR affected company, please just keep your eye out for that and let us know if you need help getting connected with the right people to ensure success in filling out those surveys. The next section that we're going to talk about is water, and I'm going to pass it over to Lydia to give a quick overview in this area.
Yeah, thank you. In a similar vein, we're working with the city of Bellevue to strategize the best way to collect water usage data from members as we hope to begin tracking that similar to transportation. We really want to advance water consumption reductions and help you all save some money on your water bills. There will be updates to come, so keep an eye out for that. And I'd also like to note that this is just coming in a time of voluntary water conservation and water shortages. About this time last year, water utilities were asking for people to reduce their water consumption just due to water low resource levels. We foresee this becoming an ongoing trend. And so we hope to promote water use reduction, also in alignment with our goals of resource reduction, to help secure and stabilize this precious resource with all of your help. We're here to support you all through this and are happy to connect members with resources and programs that facilitate water reduction in properties. So please feel free to reach out at any time for support or with any questions you may have. And I will hand it back to Riley.
Thank you so much. And I will also note on that, if your company provides resources for folks on reducing their water usage in their buildings, that is also something we encourage you to reach out with so that we can communicate that to members as well. The last area that we'll cover is our grant-funded projects, which mostly falls into our stormwater programming. We have two main grants that we are working on that apply to the city of Bellevue. The first one being a project funded by the Department of Ecology and EPA, and something that we're partnering with Pacific Rim Environmental on, which is helping building owners and managers identify and remove, or learn how to identify and remove PCBs in building materials. So the goal here is to keep these toxins out of our waterways, which is an incredibly important thing for keeping ourselves healthy and our salmon populations healthy. So we are hosting workshops for the next 2.5 years to help folks understand the risks and the resources available here. The first one is coming up November 19th, and it will be a virtual workshop. And then we have an in-person workshop on December 4th at the Smart Building Center in Seattle. We will be bringing some of these in-person workshops to Bellevue as well, so keep your eye out for those. But if you or anybody that you know would be interested in learning about this topic, please send them our way. We would love to have them there. The other project I want to touch on is a project funded by King County Waterworks, which will be we'll be exploring the green stormwater infrastructure implementation in affordable housing in King County. So we are working with housing providers as well as technical experts to draw up a toolkit for our affordable housing providers to understand how to implement GSI on site, as well as for all of us to understand maybe what gaps still exist in this landscape that we can all work toward filling, to make sure that each community has access to this important kind of infrastructure to reduce pollution and increase beautification of our spaces and overall well-being of our residents. We have focus groups coming up for well, two different focus groups for this project. One is going to be for our affordable housing providers, and this is scheduled in October. So if you work with affordable housing providers that are interested in this topic, please send them our way. We want to, get as much input as possible on the barriers and opportunities that folks are facing when it comes to this topic. The second focus group that we will be hosting will be for our technical experts. Sorry. So we will be asking all of you who have some expertise in this area to help us understand a little bit better maybe what some of the challenges are from a technical point of view. And this will be happening at some point in early 2025. We haven't yet scheduled it, but keep your eye out. So those are our two big grant projects that we're working on right now. And please, if you have any questions on any of them, reach out to me or Lydia, and we would be happy to give you more information. Alrighty. And before I hand over the floor back to Daniel, I am going to quickly be covering some of the upcoming policy issues and just a brief overview of the landscape that we are seeing coming down. Before I get started, I just want to remind you all that the 2030 districts are here to support your sustainability journeys. And a big piece of this is making sure that everybody is aware of and educated on what is coming down the pipeline. The 2030 district does not support formally a position on anything that we are about to discuss, but this is just, I think, an important conversation for us to have to shed some light on what's going on for those who may not be as plugged into the policy world as maybe my brain is. So the first one that I want to talk about is the Climate Commitment Act. So as some of you may be aware, there is an election coming up in November. During that election, there will be a couple of initiatives on the ballot that pertain to this space that we're all working in. The first one is with regard to the Climate Commitment Act. For those of you who may not know, the Climate Commitment Act is Washington State's carbon cap and invest bill. And it basically has the largest polluters need to purchase allowances for carbon pollution, and the funds from the sale of those credits goes toward a bunch of different environmental programming in the state of Washington, including for some environmental justice programs and for resources and incentives to help our buildings electrify, which is very relevant to all of the work that we're talking about. There is an initiative on the ballot in November that proposes to repeal the Climate Commitment Act. So that is one area I would just really encourage everybody to look a little bit more into. The other piece that I wanted to chat briefly about is the utility electrification. So in 2024, early this year, the legislature passed a bill called House Bill 1589, which is basically a bill that helps the largest utilities plan to meet Washington's climate targets that we have signed into law. And the bill also aims to protect customers and their access to clean energy rebates. The initiative on the ballot this fall doesn't necessarily propose to repeal the whole bill, but it does propose to repeal some key parts of it that could have some implications for this landscape that we're working in. And again, just want to make sure that everybody's aware of this and knows that they can come to us to find the right resources to figure out what's going on in this world, because I know that it can be kind of murky sometimes. Again, I just want to state that we're not formally endorsing any position on any of this, but we think that it is really important for folks to just be aware of what's going on around them, since you're all such important players in this space. So that is all I have. I'm going to hand it back to Daniel, but please feel free to shoot me any questions if you need.
Great, thank you, Riley. So we've got a lot going on right now, which is exciting for us. But the thing that we probably have the most going on at the moment is our events. We have a huge number of events coming down the pipeline. Starting on Monday, we're going to have a tour of Puesta del Sol, which is Bellevue's first only net zero elementary school with the Bellevue School District. This is they've done a bunch of sustainability work for this facility, and it's a really exciting thing that's happening in Bellevue, and we'd love to have more folks come out and join us for that. If you'd like, let us know, and we can get you registered for that. We also wanted to extend an invitation on behalf of the Seattle 2030 district. They are having a summer social on September 18th at a really cool new building called Washington 1000, which is a Hudson Pacific Properties building. So they're going to have a big, nice rooftop happy hour get together. And for those that came to our Bellevue 2030 district summer social, we're hoping to have as good of a time or even better in Seattle. So although I think we set the bar pretty high, I know a lot of people like me were sticking around until the bitter end, and we had a pretty good time of it. So we're hoping to repeat the process here in Seattle on September 18th. We have our PCB awareness webinar coming up on November 19th as well. And the Clean Building Incentive Program webinar is going to be on 10/29. Now, for those that don't know about the Clean Building Incentive Program, this is a great program that's being offered through the city of Bellevue, and also I think Issaquah, and I want to say Redmond. Is that right? Not Redmond? Not Redmond. Not Redmond. Okay. So not Redmond, but it's Issaquah, Bellevue, and the Washington State Hospitality Association are all providing this service, which is just a really great opportunity for folks who want to at least get a first pass at their buildings. It's benchmarking, doing an initial kind of audit of where you're standing from your building perspective, and then starting to get an eye of what the next steps might be for getting into compliance with the Washington State Clean Buildings Law. Definitely look into it. It's a great free service that's being offered by the city. So if you have an opportunity to do that, please do. I'll also just mention we're in talks, although we have not formalized it yet, with our friends at Bellevue colleges to do a tour of the sustainability measures that they have put in place to gain salmon safe certification, which is really cool that they're doing that at the campus level. So we're hopefully going to be scheduling a tour with them before the end of the year to make that happen. And we really appreciate our partners at Salmon Safe for helping to facilitate that process. Stay tuned. We'll hopefully have more information in the coming weeks about that. And finally, I just wanted to say that, for all of our members, all of our education programming is 50% off for members. Everyone should have a code specific to them for getting that 50% off of your membership, off of your education fees. So if you don't know what that is, email us and we'll make sure you have your code so that you can save on your education events. One last thing I wanted to mention is that we're having an increasing number of our events be USGBC certified. So if you also are interested in getting continuing education credits for your lead associates or whatever lead certification you may hold, this is another great way to get that done as well. Thank you, Laura. I knew that I'm glad somebody is enthusiastic about lead continuing education credits, because we're really excited too. All right, and now what we're going to do is we're going to turn it over to our friends at the City of Bellevue to share a little bit about some interesting stuff that's coming up with their EV Readiness program. So, Colin, I think I'm handing it over to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen if you don't mind. And you all can see this?
Not yet.
Not yet. Uh-oh. Oh, it's because I didn't press share. I just pressed what screen I want to do. Okay, that's better. Cool, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Colin Monson. I'm the city's climate and electric mobility coordinator. And we're here to talk to you today about electric vehicles, and particularly a proposal we have regarding the city building code. It's about a 15 or so minute presentation, and then we'll have about, I think, 5 or so minutes for Q&A, and then afterwards we'll send a little online comment card if you're so inclined. But really here today, sort of get the word out, get some initial thoughts, answer any questions about this, because frankly, it's sort of a weird niche topic that only folks like yourselves have like strong opinions on. So connecting with groups like this throughout the past 2 months or so. So what's going to work first? Yeah.
Can you full screen the slide deck?
Oh, I'm sorry. I see. I see the problem here. Sorry about that.
No worries.
There we go. Why am I? Are we good? Great. I'm so sorry. I love virtual meetings. Everything goes right every time. So the first few slides here, we're going to talk about sort of the city's EV planning process as a little bit of a sneak preview and a little bit of background, and then the majority of the time we'll spend talking about the building code. So the planning process we call our EV roadmap. We started this back in December. At this point, we expect to put out a draft for public consumption in the next, actually, I think next week, actually. And then we'll look to publish that in the end of September. And then from there, we can really dive into implementation and sort of more charging, more everything around that. So a little bit of a sneak preview here into some of the work we're doing through this planning process. The main question I'm trying to answer is where are we in Bellevue with EVs today, and where will we be between 2030 and 2050? And really, what is the city's role in that process. So this is a little bit of some modeling we've done in terms of and looking to understand how many vehicles on the road, and from how many vehicles we get to how many chargers we get to, what should the city be doing to be providing those chargers. We'll see a few more versions of this graph in the coming slides. So we'll see a little more data about sort of what we're expecting to see. Through this in the spring, we did a lot of engagement around this, online surveys, in-person surveys, focus groups and property managers, and really want to highlight 3 key takeaways here that are relevant to our discussion about the building code. One is that we understand that people want to charge their vehicles at home, but 80% of all charging nationally today happens at home. And in our survey of EV drivers, 85% of them said they would prefer to charge at home over all other locations. Second, really important part, it is really hard to get charging into existing multifamily buildings. Those retrofits are really expensive. They're really time consuming and just logistically very challenging. And that's an area that I would expect the city to be focused on in the coming years, as well as, frankly, basically every other government agency that's working on vehicle electrification. Lastly, we heard a desire for an emphasis on what's called the EV capable category, particularly from our development community. We'll sort of define what that means in a few slides, but basically one to really focus on more of like a long-term solution. So that was our little very quick preview of our city planning effort. Again, that will be should have a public draft in the next week or so, and then you'll be able to read sort of the full version later in the fall. Now we're going to take a hard turn here into a proposed building code update. This would only affect multifamily buildings and only new multifamily buildings when it would go into effect. And the reason is, as we've seen through our planning process, Bellevue's really, really high EV adoption, and we're expecting that only to continue into the future. We really want to be prepared for that moving forward. So going to do a little bit of a 101 here on charging and EV readiness. First part here, when we talk about EV readiness, we're only talking about level 2 charging. It's because one, it's just sort of the most appropriate for at-home use, and then 2, the state building code defines EV readiness in terms of level 2 charging. This is what I was referring to a few slides ago. 3 categories of EV readiness. Each of these are sort of per parking space. So on the left, we have an EV capable parking space. That is one that has the capacity and the raceway or the conduit to one day host a charging station. An EV ready parking space is sort of all of that, plus the wiring and an outlet. And then finally, a charging station is a charging station. Again, all of these are like per parking space. So getting into some data about like why we're looking at doing this. As I mentioned up top, Washington has really, really high EV adoption. It's 2nd or 3rd highest in the nation by state. Just depends on if you count the District of Columbia or not. Bellevue is 3 times the rate of EVs on the road today than the state does. That's not a trend we expect to see turn around anytime soon. The EV market in about 20 countries thus far, predominantly in Europe and Asia, has mimicked a similar pattern we see in sort of all new adoption of new technology, where once we hit what's called a 5% market share, that threshold, then we see this really explosive growth up towards mass adoption. For context, 5% is where the iPhone was in about 2008. And then the US is well above that, and Washington, Bellevue are way more above that. Again, not expecting that to turn around. And then on the policy side, in addition to the market, by state mandate, 100% of new vehicles sold 2035 and beyond will be electric in Washington. And sort of zooming in on the Washington market here, just sort of illustrate the local part of this. We can really see that same pattern starting to play out here in the state as we've sort of hit and gone past that tipping point. Again, just more about why we don't expect this to turn around. My personal favorite part of this chart is the singular hydrogen vehicle that's ever been purchased in Washington, going back to as far as 2010. So again, more of our sneak preview modeling from the roadmap. Putting this all together, we're expecting to see about 100% EV adoption in Bellevue sometime around 2050. And this is really what we're trying to plan for with public charging and, as we'll see in a second, with charging in new multifamily buildings. So we're going to see this table a few times repeated in the coming slides. So just want to orient ourselves here. This is what is currently in the state building code as of this past March. On the left here, we have our building types, so non-residential, single-family, multifamily. In the middle, we have our EV readiness categories, the same as ones that we saw a few slides ago. So EV capable, ready, and charging stations. These columns, it's very important to note that these are cumulative, right? So in a new multifamily building in Washington, 10% of parking would be capable, 25 ready, and then 10% would be charging stations for a total of 45%. This 45% figure is very, very important because if we dive into our projections of EV growth in Bellevue in the coming years, we're expecting to blow by that rate of EVs on the road within the next decade, and then well beyond that in the years after that. You all, I assume, know this probably better than I do, but if we if a useful life of a building, if an apartment building is about 50 years or so, we really want to be avoiding those costly, challenging retrofits that are likely going to be inevitable in the next 10 years, if not relatively early in that building's life in the years beyond 2035. That's the problem we're trying to solve for here by looking at our building code. So this is a proposal we had sort of shopped around with some groups back in January based on the best available information we had at the time, sort of at the early part of our planning process with the roadmap. The green here is just the cells that we were looking to amend or that we recommended amending at the time. You'll note that we are up to 65% of total parking for non-residential buildings and 75% for multifamily buildings. Since then, as I mentioned, we've done a lot of outreach. We've done a lot of outreach for this topic and for the roadmap in general. And moving forward, we have 3 key changes that we're making for this proposal. So one, as I've said a few times, we know that people want to charge at home. Therefore, we're only focused on that multifamily category. 2, there is some uncertainty around the future, right, in terms of like how exactly those projections will be playing out, and particularly how they'll be playing out at a neighborhood by neighborhood level or even a building by building level. So with respect to that, we want to only touch those EV capable and EV ready categories to do more future proofing and really give a building and property manager, building owner, the ability and flexibility to sort of add charging that's much easier, much cheaper, sort of when they feel the demand in their building, not over prescribing too much charging upfront. And then lastly, we hear a lot from our development community in particular is just it's really expensive out there. It's really expensive out there for development. And therefore, we've sort of bumped down that total amount of EV parking for the new versions. So I'm happy to come back to this, pulled up on the screen later on, but these are the 2 versions we're shopping around, looking for feedback on, answering questions on. Each of them are frankly very similar. They're each based off of a city in California that has 1, EV adoption that's much more on par with where Bellevue is, and 2, has done a very similar update to their building code. Each of them, the only change that we're looking at making is going up to 65% of total parking only for multifamily buildings. The only difference here is that this first version, the San Jose version, does that via the EV capable category, and the Santa Monica version does that via EV ready. Put this in broader context, here's a bunch of cities that have done similar work going above and beyond where we're saying we should be in Bellevue. You'll note that as early as 2017, 2019, places like Vancouver and San Jose were up to 100% of total parking that's EV something. And we really want to point this out for 2 reasons. One, to sort of put this in national context for places that are much more similar to Bellevue in terms of EV adoption. And then 2, also, the data we have can really support going sort of above and beyond the 65%. But we sort of view this as a good first step for the city based on where we expect to be in about 2035. So the big question we always get about this is how expensive is this? For cost modeling here, we're basing off of what we expect a very typical building to be built in Bellevue in the coming years, this 250-unit mid-rise building with structured parking. The main takeaway here, and we see this in every analysis that's been done across the country on this topic, is that these retrofits are so much more expensive, and this is what we're really trying to avoid. Yes, the 2 options here are more expensive than what is currently in the state building code. But again, if we understand these retrofits are inevitable, this is what we want to avoid moving forward. Putting this cost in the context of the total building cost here, our 2 options that we're shopping around are between 0.2 and 0.3% of the total building and between 1 and 2% of the cost of the total parking for each of these buildings. Again, this is above what the what is currently in the state code, but we want to put this in context of how much this building would cost to make. So there are a few other requirements that we're, again, shopping around, answering questions, looking for feedback on. All these have been pulled from jurisdictions in our region. First is that these would apply in the cases of a significant retrofit to an existing building. Second, that we're talking about parking, but we can't use the EV readiness stuff to modify any parking minimums where applicable. And then lastly, that we're just physically marking EV ready spaces as EV ready. We view this as a phase one citywide approach. That's like 65% rate as a first step into this world. But then as the city goes sort of neighborhood by neighborhood in different land use code updates, so Wilburton, for example, Bellred down the line, using the added flexibility we have from the land use code to include incentives for going for just financially meeting these requirements, but then potentially going above and beyond them, sort of as the market dictates at that time. So that's mostly it. We're doing a lot of meetings like these with folks around the city to get some feedback on what we're proposing. And we'll be going to council in late October for a first introductory touch point, and then likely 1 to 2 more after that with draft code language and the like. So that's all I have. I have a comment card online, which we can send out, but I want to use the rest of the time we have to just sort of answer any questions that you all may have. I know this is kind of a weird technical topic, so I've heard a lot of it, but I'm going to pull up this slide so we have the 2 proposed options up on screen, but feel free to raise your hand and get some help answering any questions as they come up.
Colin, can you share the timeline again for when this is going to be kind of getting underway?
Yeah, so this is it. And then I see Brandon has something. So yeah, we have a council date for late October. That will be open to the public, as all council dates are. Comments, questions, welcome for council. That one will be sort of a telling city council what this topic is. And then after that, it would be, for example, draft code language or stuff like that. Brandon, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, Colin, thanks. I did make some comments at a different forum when you first rolled this out. I think it was the Bellevue Development Committee, maybe. So I'm glad to hear that you've went back and tweaked your proposals and looked at some other jurisdictions to see how they're approaching it. And just for everyone else's benefit, was the general comment was, prescribing too much of the chargers to be installed day one was perhaps not necessary and maybe more expensive than it needs to be, because we could grow into that demand over time if we chose, the real challenging part, to Colin's point, is this retrofitting not having to retrofit the buildings rather, and having the conduits in place at the very least. That's the most important thing. Stringing the power and making sure you have the panel capacity is the next most important thing. So to grow into the future. And then the third thing was just that we don't know yet whether these are really going to take off. 20 years from now, we may be onto a different technology, because there are still issues with the rare metals, with the weight of the batteries, the short range that they have, so it doesn't address every driver's needs. So we'll have to see, but we just want to be ready to grow into demand over time. I think these options help us do that. With option 2 and 3, I'd probably lean towards option 2, just because it puts a little more emphasis on the EV capable. But the development community doesn't really want to wind up with a lot of paperweights that the industry's moved on to some other technology, and we've spent all this money on chargers that we now don't need anymore. Or the charging technology changes, and we got to replace it with a different charger that's a level 4 charger that's more efficient. We just don't know. So having this flexibility will help us grow into that demand and respond to market over time. The developers are not going to shut ourselves out from leasing to people with EV stalls. It's definitely something that our residents increasingly ask for. And I don't think we want to be functionally obsolete, but I think this strikes a happy medium, having this flexibility with one of these two options. But I'm for option 2.
Yeah. Thank you. Peter, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, just of stuff that I've been kind of musing on in the EV space. One is around just, as we look to the future, maybe it's 100% EV market saturation, right? But with current EVs, EV range, and people's typical driving habits, I mean, I know with my EV, once a week maybe is when I charge it, right? And so I'm just kind of curious how any of that data has informed these ratios, given the frequency of charging that people are, going to likely kind of see. The second part to that is, how has like the ability of like charge management systems been considered that can, theoretically take a 30% of total parking spaces maybe live all at once, but actually have an outlet at every parking space if you want to give people the flexibility to charge wherever they want to be and not wait for somebody, right? Because the charging systems can manage the load to the electrical capacity, and for overnight charging, which is kind of the residential default, you've got anywhere from 8 to 14 hours of charging time to charge a vehicle that probably needs about 6 to 8 hours of charging time for a full depletion. So those are a couple of questions that I had.
Yeah, and before I answer them, Riley, I totally lost track of time, so feel free to cut us off whenever our Q&A time is done. So to answer your first question, regarding the rates of charging, I don't know that that's something we would consider. So basically, the model that I think we follow a lot of is NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, has a really nice graphic about sort of what the national charging landscape would look like in 2030 once you have X million EVs on the road. And basically their model is you give as many charges to people at home as possible, and you fill in the gaps on the proverbial tree here where the roots are at home charge and everything else is the leaves with shopping centers, highways, libraries, etc. Right? The idea being that, as you said, 95% of the trips you take in your life can be covered if you go home at night, you plug your car, and you wake up the next day and your car is at like 80 to 100%, right? So I guess to answer your question, the idea is just charge at home is again covers 95+% of the travel in your life, and that our 65% rate here is just sort of match up how many EVs we expect to be on the road in 2035, right?
Yeah, but I guess where I was going with that was, if you only need to charge your car once a week, right? Then everybody can have an EV, and you only need, if everyone's, kind of judiciously choosing the right day of the week, right, to balance out in this optimized, usage of EV charging in an apartment building, right? In theory, you could get away with as little as 14% EV charging stations if everybody's, able to kind of balance out their charging perfectly on schedule, right? So I'm just kind of curious if there were any studies that have been done about utilization when you get to kind of higher saturation and usage that that might say, like, is 65% of the total parking really needed if you can leverage some of that diversity?
Colin,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand on this, but I might have some answers for you too.
Yeah, I do want to get to Brandon because I do have this hand up real quick. If you have any thoughts, I think the chat may be a good use of that. I'm a little bit time cognizant because there are more things that the 2030 Discord wants to get to. I think I'll say real quick, I've not seen any studies on that in particular. So that I think it's a fair point, but a difficult question to answer in that particular regard. It also is very building dependent, because if you have assigned parking versus shared parking, that sort of really changes the equation on there. And that's what we're doing is pretty hands off the wheel in terms of the details about like what kind of charging, if it's shared, if it's public, that stuff is not being incorporated in what we're doing, nor any other cities. So I think those are the considerations really change the math on what you're talking about, but I've not seen any particular studies on exactly that.
Colin, let's just keep rolling with this. We don't want to cut it off.
Okay.
And just before we get to Brandon's question too, Peter with Northwest Partners LLC, they do adaptive load management EV charging. Okay. So he may have some really valuable perspectives to put into this too.
Yeah, I think since we're not time constrained, Peter, if you want to go ahead and share your thoughts on this, that would be great. And then we can get to Brandon's question after. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we're currently now engineering systems with considerably reduced energy need. So there's a project at University Village with 800 units, and they have 600 parking stalls. We're able to reduce the requirement for amperage by 60%, so by 75% because of load management. Not everybody comes in every night needing a full charge. Some people charge every third day. The average person drives 30 miles a day. So all of that helps into the equation of reducing the cost, the upfront cost of the infrastructure. The other option for them is to put in all the amperage, 6,000, I think, that they wanted to put in and be ready for all 600 of the parking stalls that they have. So that is the other option, and it's relatively inexpensive. And we typically tell the apartment owners they can charge around $50 to $75 per stall per month as a new source of income. So they can actually use that source of income to qualify for larger loan amount, however they want to use it, and it increases their value significantly. So, and you can also retrofit this system into existing buildings. You're actually pulling the power from the electrical system before it gets to the residential meters. And you can, especially at night, charge vehicles when people aren't using. So it creates a microgrid in the building. So especially at night when people aren't using heat or their stoves, that power gets diverted out to the stalls in the garage. So we've figured that most buildings in the Northwest that have electric heat will probably never need additional power brought to the garage for charging purposes. So this technology exists today. It's in place. It's been primarily in California because there's been so much demand, but it is here now. And so anyways, I just wanted to share that. If people would like more information, let me know. But I want to make sure that you put this into your equation when you're looking at how to prepare for the future.
Yeah, that's a good. And can you repeat the name of that building just so I have that?
It's a Lennar project. I can't, it's called 3020 45th in Seattle.
Cool, thank
So
you.
I'm happy to share that with you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. The last one I'll make real quick is I didn't say this during the slide, but the state code does allow, and I would say encourage, going down to 16 amps per parking space. It's defined as like a level 2 is defined as 40 amps. So I would take advantage of this as much as possible because, as what Peter said, you're more than having the amount of electricity you need for each space in that.
Yeah.
Brian,
So
yeah.
Yeah, so you really only need 10 amps per stall. You still need to provide 40 amp circuit, but you really only need to dedicate 10 amps.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And Pat, I think had a comment to share also about battery capture, which is relevant maybe to this discussion before we go to Brandon.
Sure, I can jump in briefly. Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion around sort of optimizing toward a minimum number of chargers. And I think it actually is a very worthy discussion and something to analyze further. I'll also add, sort of related to that, an emerging opportunity is turning basically our electric vehicles into batteries that can support buildings in the wider grid. And so I think that that's one of the cases to sort of consider carefully what we think of as a minimum of chargers to accompany, a collection of electric vehicles in any single multifamily building, right? Because when renewables are running well, like solar during portions of the day, those electric vehicles can capture and store that energy for later on when the building and the grid might not have those resources available to them. So I think that that's sort of a qualifier and something that makes more complex the discussion of what is an optimum in terms of number of chargers per the size of electric vehicles that need to be served. Because, right, these EVs have a battery and storage function, not just we need to charge them up. Let's use as few chargers as possible so they can be getting out on the road, taking people from point A to point B. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And then can we go to Brandon?
I was going to add what Peter sort of already did, but about the load management system in Seattle, I think the power requirement is now for the building to be sized to handle the charging as if 100% of the stalls were level 2 chargers. But you can use a load management system to manage that over the course of the evening when stalls are sitting there. And, like you said, only need to be charged a portion of the time. The load management system can reduce that electrical load down by whatever factor that I forget it allows. But the other way to economize it would be to shift to shared chargers instead of, because the parking stalls are only going to be built, to what the market demands. And we've been trying to tamp those down over time to minimize the amount of parking provided and eliminate parking minimums where we have made investments in transit. So, we're only going to build about as much parking as we think will be needed and nothing more. And if that means everybody pretty much has a reserve stall, if you're sort of economizing parking like that. But if you dedicate a bank of shared stalls for charging, and then once you're done with charging, you retreat back to your assigned stall, that is another way to economize the number of chargers. The technology in the chargers exists for that, where they'll bill residents by the hour, so they're incentivized to move along and get their car out of the stall, rather than just letting it sit overnight. So that's another possible way of sort of economizing the number of actual chargers installed. But it would require the developer to overbuild parking slightly to do that in order to create that shared bank of stalls.
Yeah, it's a fair, and I think this answer may address a question or comment you had a little bit earlier about something. It's totally escaping me. The shared parking model that you're describing is typically most effective if you're using the DC fast charging, right? Which is way more expensive to install, requires way more electricity to operate. And the model in that case is and who knows, this may change a little bit, but the model is like, you get home, you plug your car in for half an hour, it's full, you have to interrupt your dinner, your TV time, go unplug it, move your car to, it's right. the reason we don't, I remember the question you asked. The reason we're starting to see like the level 2 assigned or level 2 like more one-to-one work is because it's that like simplicity, that convenience factor you get in a building that's like much more on par with what EV drivers have in a single family home. And that's sort of in addition to the complexities cost of the DC fast charging. And the point I was going to make a second ago was, I think it's a totally fair point to say, hey, we're still early on the EV transition, et cetera, et cetera. This is the thing that's catching on. This is the thing that we see in the US. This is the version we see in Europe, in Asia, et cetera, which is leading to that confidence about pursuing this as many other cities, states, counties have pursued as well.
how we're selling these systems is that we're encouraging the developers to put $60, $75 per month per stall into their pro forma. And what we're finding is if you have 100 chargers going and you're charging $60 per month for those, adds about $8,000 per month to your income stream and $1.5 million in value to your building. So owners really need to understand that this is a money maker. Everybody's looking for additional income streams on multifamily, to first of all, to get them out of the ground because construction costs are so high. But here's a way to create an additional income stream and make buildings pro forma better and to achieve income for the life of the building. I mean, our buildings are really the new gas stations, and people don't want to share charging. It's really a hassle. You don't know when somebody's going to leave. You have to keep checking to see if it's available. People want to and will pay to have a dedicated charger in their stall. So that's where we're having success with developers right now.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, addressed Peter's question in the chat, but Angie had a question there as well.
Yeah, and I can address this verbally. And just for those who didn't see it, Peter was asking about level 1 charging, which is much slower, charge a car and closer to like 20 hours instead of overnight. It is something we've considered and we look at. It's a technology that works for a lot of people that charge in single family homes, right? If you just have an outlet in your garage, you plug your car in, and that works for a lot of people. Unfortunately, because the state codifies EV readiness in terms of level 2, that makes it really, really challenging for us to sort of build upon the state code with charging that's like below what they're suggesting. Angie was asking about most people charging home, shouldn't there be different requirements for residential versus other occupancy types? Yes, the state code currently, does have different requirements for non-residential on the top line here and multifamily in the bottom. To the point about people charging at home, I agree, and that's why we're only looking at multifamily buildings in our code update in Bellevue. Sorry for bouncing around these slides so much. I just think the visual is kind of helpful because this is a topic we get a lot of questions on. I think we have 2 or 3 minutes left. I know that Daniel wanted to save a little bit for the end. Are there any other last questions or thoughts? I will put my email and our little comment card online in the chat here. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please reach out to me. It's not a topic we get. We have to like really find our audience for this. So I welcome all the discussion. And then if you do want to tell us exactly how you feel or sort of suggestions, the online comment card is a great avenue for that. But if there's nothing else, I can turn it back over to Riley and Daniel to wrap us up here.
Great, thank you so much, Colin. Riley has one last thing to share, and then yeah, why don't you go ahead, Riley, and then we'll just wrap it up.
Yes, I forgot to mention in our grant-funded work updates, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that we are having a policy roundtable in October. I will get you the date and time. A lot of folks on this call I know have already received an invitation to that. If you're interested in that, please, please, please join us. I am trying to pull up the RSVP form. Here we go. I'm going to drop this in the chat. If you're interested in learning more about this, please fill out this form so I can get you all of the information. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, and I'll just say that that's going to be a really great opportunity for us to kind of come together and just share what some of the challenges are in addressing, the state and local building performance standards here in our region, and just trying to figure out what kind of incentives, programs, and resources might be the most effective in helping us get there. So, Brandon, Todd, Steve, folks that have buildings would really be curious to know, like, what's the most helpful thing for you all when it comes to this? What's the resource that's that's not out there that you need. And then, the hope is that we take these policy recommendations to our elected officials and see if we can't get some progress going on maybe just some, either better funding or more funding, or better programs or more programs that are going to help us get to where we want to go. So we're very excited to hear from property owners, property managers, but also architects, engineers, contractors, developers, anybody who, has a good eye into this space. We really want to get a wide perspective on this. Well, it is high noon, so we're gonna break, but thank you all so much for joining us, and a special thanks to our friends from the city of Bellevue for coming and talking to us about the EV charging program and what that looks like. Please follow up with Colin if you have any questions. If you hate the sound of this, also let him know too. He's tough. He's a tough cookie, so he'll be all right.
I'm not tough, but do tell me.
Put it in the comment card. That's the easiest thing. And yeah, thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you at some of our upcoming events. We've got a lot coming down the pipeline, and there's a lot of great ways to engage with the 2030 district. So thank you all again, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thanks
guys.
Thank you.
You all.
Take care, everyone.